That's the last thing.
Planning director work now.
Yeah. Good evening. I'd like to call this meeting to order. It is 6:06. All trustees are present except trustee Warren and trustee Bockhorst, who are excused, and trustee McKay. Has this meeting been published?
The meeting has been posted and noticed according to law.
Great. We have no special order of business today, so we'll just go on to the consent agenda. Is there, oh, never mind. The first item for today is our Zimmerman review of visual structural analysis and concept for the remodeling of the fire station. Hi, John.
Good afternoon, good evening. Can everybody hear me? No. Louder? Should we move this closer?
Just talk about it.
Okay.
The mic doesn't amplify your voice.
Could you just state your name?
My name is John Savanish, Project Manager for Zimmerman Architectural Studios. Here to give a report to the Committee of the Whole on our review of the building and its application for the fire station. The agenda is 5 topics. We're going to talk about the objective of the study. The first thing, we will review the program. The program is the size of the building that we would anticipate to serve the needs of the fire department at its present location. We will talk about how we are organizing those spaces within the proposed facility. We'll talk about the financial issues tied into that proposed solution, and then we have plenty of time for questions and answers. Generally, I think I've presented to this group of individuals before. If you have a question, I don't have any problem answering it at the time. I think we wait until it goes on later to lose context. So whenever you have a question, you can let me know and I'll have to address it at that time. So the objective was to consider the insertion of fire department only functionality into the present facility. Previous studies had looked generally at either combined uses or in some instances vacation by North Shore Fire or some combination thereof. The building had never been looked at in terms of a standalone fire department building. Previous studies had looked at the usefulness of the site with the tear down of the building, but we had never looked at how we're going to use this building for the fire department. That was one of the primary purposes of this study, and to compare it to information that we collected earlier. Important to note that the building was jointly occupied by North Shore Fire as well as the Shorewood Police Department. Shorewood Police Department vacated the building in a project that's in the second phase of remodeling now, and so it is solely occupied by North Shore Fire Department currently. And again, the objective was to figure out what the project usefulness would be in context of the current program statement as well as the space that was available in that facility. And we had done previous analysis, the construction value of the replacement facility. This gave us an opportunity to price out what we thought the change to the program statement or reuse that would be. So the second topic is program. Program is a tabulated list of spaces architecturally. It is not Microsoft Outlook or anything like that. It basically collects all the data that is useful within the building, the size of spaces necessary to serve the function attached to that function for the fire department in this case. So the size of a particular room is tabulated, and then we use mathematics in terms of how big the project ultimately will be to compare, in this case, the yellow column, which we had looked at previously, which is new construction, is sort of a pure assessment of how the building would function. After that, when we're putting it into remodeled construction, there is comparison of existing and as drawn. Existing is what the space, the tabulation of space that the fire department currently occupies. As drawn is taking the graphic information you have later and looking at how those spaces would be arranged and the resultant sizes of those spaces in the facility to fulfill the objectives of the program. Important to note that the existing building is 17,773 square feet. The fire department for a facility such as this identified a new needs about 9,000 square feet. The building is currently configured on 3 levels, and the fire department would prefer a single level solution if we were starting from scratch. So with those issues, Again, just a fault or a reiteration, existing is what we have, new is what we would need, as drawn is how it fits. There are some notes, and I'm going to refer to 4 specific notes. Existing compared to new is really close on the net square footage. So we are pretty successful at fitting the program in to the present space occupied by the fire department, but with the asterisk that it's misappropriated. We would prefer more space be allocated for apparatus than presently is there. We don't need as much space for firefighting. So while the numbers work out to be about the same, they're sort of inappropriate relative to the current needs of the department. So need is different. There is a basement in the present facility. We would generally prefer to be on one level for the size, agency, and the functionality we have, and remember we have a 3-level building. With the space that we haven't identified as a need for the fire department, there are 2 things we're tracing. One is largely the basement space that the existing is unused by the agency, so it is a space that we would be improving but not getting functional use of. There's no functionality that is served in the basement for the agency. And there is basically the garage space, which is the bump out here on sort of the northeast corner, the southeast corner. We'd be proposing to put a community room in that space. Again, it's space that the department does not need access to, and we viewed it as a possible space that the community could get better advantage use for. Another thing that definitely affects the ability to be efficient in the building is circulation. In the present facility, we have stairs that serve 3 levels. We'd be proposing to put in an elevator, so we have a larger building in terms of circulation. In a single-story slab-on-grade building, we don't have to provide stairs and elevators. So it doesn't mean that it's wrong, it just means that that's one of the reasons that the building is a bit bigger when we talk about multi-story buildings. And we're just a little bit less efficient in the proposed solution because we accept it as a sort of a preconceived idea that we weren't going to spend a lot of money structurally removing walls that are load-bearing. The building was built as an area structure. There's actually in the original drawings, the range area that presently is occupied was deemed a fallout shelter. So it was built really stoutly, and a lot of the walls that we have in the lower level specifically and going out through the building are load-bearing. The cost of removing those walls to make the space the direct size that it needs to be is probably not the right approach. We just take those rooms as bigger and accept them as they are rather than doing modifications that will move a wall in 4 feet to hit the program. Organization of the building. So the existing building is 3 levels. Generally, occupation of the basement was the sole functionality of the Shorewood Police Department. There are some mechanical services in that level that afford the building operational integrity, but it's largely old police department space. The first floor, the center core, was largely the police department as well as the garage on that southeast corner. And North Shore Fire occupied both the north and south face. So it was a bisected building. It was always a bit odd functionality. It was weird that way anyway. But right now, spaces that are Shorewood PD are currently vacant. And the second floor was always the sole area that the North Shore Fire Department operated. So that space remains North Shore Fire Department irrespective of Shorewood Police Department, or North Shore Fire Department irrespective of Shorewood Police Department vacating the building. So you had kind of a mix of 2 spaces, one of which was exclusive to the other, split by a shared space, and that's the nature of the current building. So what would we do with it? At the lowest level, we would be looking at enclosing one of the 2 open stairs to provide us with the fire department functionality and the code rating that we need to have. We would also be proposing to put an elevator in to tie all 3 levels of a public building together with vertical circulation. But the balance of what's there would either be improved mechanical space or space that's left over since we don't have any fire department use going into that proposed space. On the first floor, we would be occupying the north apparatus bay as we currently do. We'd be occupying the south apparatus bay as we currently do. We would generally be putting officing functions in at the first floor along with elevatoring, and then turnout gear and other areas in support of fire department operations. Breathing apparatus maintenance, other vehicle apparatus maintenance spaces and the like would occupy the former administrative offices and a section of space that is appropriate. If you remember on the program, we're always looking to get more apparatus space. It's not just apparatus in terms of storage, it's these complementary spaces that we're looking at increasing, and the first floor allows us to do that. So what it also does is it gets officing functions down at the first floor where they're probably more effectively located than the second floor. The upper floor, the second floor, with a basement first and second, is generally fire department living environment and stays that way. So one of the things that we're doing differently is current dormitory space, environment for living and dining and kitchen and showering is broken up a little bit. We'd be providing independent sleeping quarters and toilet and showering facilities in the locations they presently are, but we'd be moving kitchen and dining functions over into this current, it's administrative space, officing space for the administrative leadership. We would be maintaining elevator access and surrounding that with storage. We'd be having laundry, fitness, day room, and other associated storage spaces and occupied spaces on that corner. And we would be enclosing the stair. Financial implications.
Can I ask a-
Yes.
So you didn't touch on administration. The existing is 579 square feet and it goes up to, it doubles.
Yes.
Why is that?
That's just a function of accepting the space as it's currently configured. We don't need that much space, but we're taking it as is. And there is very little space that we can, go the wrong way. We can occupy in that core that's not officing function. So we're basically taking that space and using it as office because we don't want to pull apparatus functionality out closer to the front edge of the building.
Is there any office or administration upstairs?
We're pulling it all downstairs.
And just double it?
That's right. And it's because that's where the office is now and we're keeping it as is. We're not proposing to make it smaller or take, I don't want to make it sound like apparatus stuff is dirty, but the wet-driven environmental kind of spaces we're not pulling back into this office core. We're trying to keep them as close to the back of the building as we can. Yes.
And so the changes to the upper floor, the second, the bathrooms and changing and living, that takes care of the gender
It does.
issues, so it would make it equally accessible
Correct.
to male and female.
Correct. It identifies individual sleeping environment, which is different than the traditional dormitory, and the fire agency dormitory is a traditional means of sleeping. North Shore Fire has always, since the earliest projects, begun to advocate for individual sleeping rooms. Oddly, the first project that got done that way was the headquarters building, and I think anecdotally, I know that there's proof of that their sick days went down by half. So the ability to isolate individuals in individual rooms helps to provide a better environment for non-transmission of stuff that you have when you're on full-time, right? Secondarily, it provides the ability to have individual access to those rooms. And then individual toileting and shower rooms are non-specific, so they could be any denomination we want them to be to fulfill the requirements of hygiene. At a minimum, one has to be posted as well. Other than that, they could be unisex.
Oh, just a moment.
So does this meet the living needs that
Yes.
the department would want?
Yeah.
Ideal. Okay.
Admittedly, though, it's probably because it was bigger,
Okay.
right? Remember, we had identified that this space was bigger than they needed. This space remains bigger than they needed. There's some unassigned space in this back corner.
Okay.
Again, what do you put that's kind of small up on the second floor? You don't take the apparatus stuff up, you just accept it as is, and it's less efficient than we'd like it to be, but it fits, and it works. Yes.
And so for the second floor, it just looks like we expanded out. And the only reason I'm asking is to see if the community room would fit up there. And so the fitness went up, the kitchen went up, and so you just kind of expanded everything?
Correct. Well, we took it as is. And a good example is, we had kitchen and dining in this space. Program identified a space, this I think happens to be, don't quote me on it, I think 376 square feet. We weren't gonna make that space smaller. Say at the program, we said we're gonna take it to the walls and that's something it'll be. So the ability to chisel space out to get more space up here, we didn't end up with a couple thousand square feet, it was modest. 1,000 square feet, excuse me, give or take. You could maybe get that space back some way, but I think it would be cost prohibitive to try to chase getting those rooms smaller to hit the program. Does that make sense?
So there's no way to design it so that like laundry and storage, there's no like contiguous space that would be left over?
The single biggest space actually happens to be the current gymnasium space, which is in this zone. This happens to be a really good location for the elevator. We could look to try to find another location for the elevator. But I would be apprehensive to include public space in what's generally the most exclusive space in the fire department if I have to. Could it be done? It could be done. But this tends to be the space that people are most relaxed, and the commingling of public space with that space is probably less desirable. We've certainly seen it done on the first floor.
So if the offices remained upstairs, then the first floor might have contiguous space?
I'm apprehensive to say it would be good space.
Okay.
This happens to be, if you're thinking about community room, this back space is actually pretty good because it's pretty clean. It's a one big space. Could you make public space in this zone? I think you could. But again, it's fairly small, 500 square feet, give or take. What the advantage of this was it was larger, it was about 900 square feet. So we got pretty close to hitting what we needed to do in terms of apparatus. Admittedly, that's the oddball, but